Well, welcome to the Community Safety Forum, everyone. I'm Senator David Waters, serving District 4, which represents Barrington, Dover, Rollinsford, and Somersworth. I'm joined today by a wonderful panel of experts to discuss how to make our communities safer and more welcome for all. We have Chief William Breault from the Dover Police Department, Janet Salsbury, Community Partners, Community Mental Health Center. We have Chief David Kretschmar of the Somersworth Police Department, Rogers Johnson, President of the Seacoast Chapter of the NAACP, John Burns, SOS Recovery Community Organization, Lieutenant Mark Brave, Strafford County Sheriff's Office, and Miraqle LaPierre Dover High School Project Dream. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being on the panel today. Let me just start by saying that these participants all believe that citizens, local service agencies, and law enforcement really need to work together to make our communities safe and welcoming places. Now, recent national events involving law enforcement, as well as the impacts of COVID-19 on people accessing mental health and recovery services, require really some new discussions of community safety and what it means. And as the report from the Equity and COVID Task Force headed by Rogers Johnson presents in really meticulous detail, many of our problems today are the result of long-standing inequities in New Hampshire in healthcare, housing, and education. It's my hope that this forum will show the good work being done together in our communities while honestly looking at what must be done better locally and at the state level for equity and renewal. As your senator, I personally must be held accountable to work for equity and justice in Concord. Now, many citizens are not really aware of what our social service providers, our law enforcement, our students face every day in our communities. Perhaps the most important result of this forum will be a demonstration of how people can talk together about profoundly difficult matters that are part of the very weft of democracy and warp of history in the fabric of America. John Lewis published today, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, the nation and world society at peace with itself." I'm looking forward to this conversation with this distinguished panel to increase public understanding of all aspects of community safety. Over the next hour, each panelist will have 3 or 4 minutes, and I will take time to introduce themselves and describe their work and their own perspectives on what community safety means. Then we'll have discussion among the panelists. We'll hear briefly from Mayors Hilliard and Carrier, and then take the questions that have been submitted. I do want to thank Isaac Epstein, who's put all of this together and is handing the technology today. And so with that, let's go around, and Chief Breault, you're up first.
Oh, thank you, Senator, and thank you for inviting me to this. You know, I'm Bill Breault. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the police chief here in the city of Dover. I've been in law enforcement for about 24, almost 25 years now. 23 of those here in Dover, and I've been the chief since May of 2018. I've had the privilege to come up through the ranks and hold a variety of different assignments here at the police department, which I think has really given me a pretty broad perspective of our community and an understanding of what our community needs. And I think that's an important thing for law enforcement to come to realize, is that every community is slightly different, and law enforcement has to respond to their individual communities. Even though Somersworth and Dover are right next door, the needs are not always the same. So we really have to look at our needs. What community safety means to me is simply that I believe that everybody in the community should feel welcome and safe to go about their lives without being in fear of being the victim of a crime or in any way mistreated. It means that when people are the victims of a crime, they feel safe coming to the police for help, and they have an understanding that they will be treated with dignity, respect, and compassion. And those aren't just words that I use. Those are really, for anybody that has interacted with the Dover Police or knows me or has met me knows those are three words that I say all the time. I preach to our people here: dignity, respect, and compassion, because we really believe that. And not only do victims need to feel that way, but people who we hold accountable for violating the law, or people that come to us for any level of help, need to feel welcome and understand that regardless of their circumstances, they'll be treated with that level of dignity, respect, and compassion. That's what community safety means to me, and from my perspective as the police chief.
Well, thank you so much, Chief. And Janet?
Yes, hi everybody, and thank you, Senator, for inviting and putting this panel together, and thank you for all the participants. My name is Janet Salsbury. I work at Community Partners. I am the Chief Clinical Officer for our Mental Health Division, which basically means that I'm in charge of all of the mental health services. I've actually been in the mental health field for over 30 years. I have worked at Community Partners for about 25 of those 30 years. And I'm also a resident of Dover, so I can certainly echo what the chief says about our community here in Dover. It is a very compassionate place, and I appreciate living here. So for those of you that are not familiar with Community Partners, we are what we call the Designated Community Mental Health Center here in Strafford County. We also serve people with developmental disabilities. So we provide comprehensive mental health treatment. We provide individualized services for persons with developmental disabilities. We do family education and a whole variety of support services. So in thinking about what community safety means to me and what it means from Community Partners' perspective, is that any person that's living in our community feels respected, understood, and cared for by others. They have a quality of life and they have access to all the services that they need, regardless of their ability to pay, transportation. At Community Partners, we really we're in the helping industry, right? So if someone needs help, we help. If someone needs encouragement, we cheer them on. If somebody needs education, we try to share our knowledge with that. And so from our perspective, when a community embraces these kinds of concepts, then we create a safe community.
Well, thank you so much, Janet. And Chief Kretschmar.
Hi, I'm Dave Kretschman. I'm the Chief of Police in Somersworth, New Hampshire. I've been a police officer here in Somersworth for about 38 years. This is my hometown. I've grown up here. My parents live here. My wife's parents live here. I have family members that still live here in town. So I have a truly vested interest in what goes on in Somersworth and the surrounding areas. It's really been said pretty clearly by Janet and Chief Breault about services that should be provided to all citizens and everybody that resides here. Everybody deserves the same type of services. I don't care how much money you have, how much money you don't have, what your living conditions are, what your financial conditions are. Every single person that lives in Somersworth deserves the same type of treatment that anybody else gets here. Really quick, I'd like to read the first half of our mission statement. I wrote this when I first took over in 2016, and it starts off with the mission of the Somersworth Police Department is to improve the quality of life by preserving the peace and safety of the community through the formation of community partnerships, creating positive interaction between the public and police. Today, I still believe in that, and I think it goes a long way towards what our department does and what we try to do as officers, along with community policing programs and different initiatives that we've started here. And again, I think that type of attitude and that outlook goes a long ways towards helping and provide safe living conditions for everybody here in town.
Thank you so much, Chief. And Rogers, welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Senator. I'm Rogers Johnson. I'm the president of the Seacoast NAACP. I also happen to be the chair of the Governor's Advisory Council on Diversity and Inclusion, which gave me the latitude to go all across the state and engage people about issues on diversity and inclusion. And I do mean all over the state. We covered through 18, no, even 20 listening sessions in various aspects of the state to talk about those issues dealing exactly with this topic. In the past, I'd say 6 weeks, I've been a member of the COVID-19 task force. We just issued a report a week ago today that was in-depth, and I do mean in-depth, 48 pages of very deep dive on healthcare initiatives. I'm also part of what's now is known as the Governor's Law Enforcement Accountability Community and Transparency Committee. So I'm now doing the evaluation of police standards and activities within the state of New Hampshire. So I'm talking to very many of Chief Kretschmar's and Chief Breault's colleagues on a number of different issues. All of this, which means that I've now had an in-depth, and I want to emphasize that word, in-depth analysis of safety issues all across the state of New Hampshire. The most important thing I want to make sure that people understand relative to safety in the state is that it's been my imperative over the last 3-4 years to involve the police within the actions of the NAACP so that our members are fully familiar with what the role of the police is, primarily to make sure that they are supporters and the police support us so that we know amongst ourselves what we can expect and what they can expect from us. This collaboration, if you will, is in our best interest because we do know that when things happen, the people we're going to be dealing with are going to be these individuals in uniform, and that's important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rogers. John.
Good evening, and thank you for having me, Senator Waters. My name is John Burns. I'm the director for SOS Recovery Community Organization. We have peer-based recovery community centers that provide supports and services for people struggling with mental health and addiction. We're primarily focused on the recovery side of that, so people looking to either find recovery or maintain their recovery, and we do that through a variety of peer-based services, from everything from direct one-on-one addiction recovery services, where we build recovery plans with them, help them find jobs, help them find employment and housing when it's available, and really remove barriers that are pretty common for people in recovery, especially in early recovery. Although we serve people with anywhere from a day to 25 years of recovery, it really doesn't matter to us. We have centers in Rochester, which we opened in 2016, one that we opened downtown Dover at 4 Broadway in spring of 2017, and then we just opened another one in Hampton last July. So we have 3 centers now. We have a staff of about 20. We're also a program of Greater Seacoast Community Health, which is Goodwin Community Health in Somersworth and Families First in Portsmouth. And I think when I think of community safety, I guess I often refer to what's called the social determinants of health. And the quick version of that is basic needs. And that is, kind of echoing what was said earlier, is that everybody deserves to have their basic needs met. And and that includes housing, and that includes food, and the access to treatment and recovery services, whether it's for mental health or substance use disorder, and just an overall when people don't have their basic needs met, they're not safe under any circumstance. And unfortunately for us, that's the vast majority of the people we serve don't have their basic needs met. They're not stably housed. They're not properly, they're not getting proper nutrition. They don't have the access they need to substance use disorder services or mental health services, and they're usually overlapped and a lot of, dual needs there. And I think, just really meeting people where they're at with that and trying to provide plans and services that are based around their needs. And unfortunately, one of the struggles that we see with community safety, in my view, is we often put together a lot of task force task forces and panels that don't include the people that need to be served, and we decide what they need for them. And it's not lost on me that I am a white male in a position of power with a whole lot of privilege who ends up on a lot of those task forces. And so how do we make those spaces more inclusive and more participatory for those who are marginalized and those who need the services more than anybody? So that's a big focus of what we do with SOS.
Thank you so much, John. And Lieutenant Breault, welcome.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Breault. I'm a lieutenant with the Strafford County Sheriff's Office. I oversee the Standards and Training Unit, which includes CALIA. What community safety means to me. Growing up, I grew up in, Lawrence, Massachusetts, and the one thing with the PD there is they communicated with the citizens. They were out at community events. And so to me, the word that comes to mind is communication. Bridging the gap between law enforcement agencies and the community. Most people act out, because I feel like they don't know why something's happening. But if the PD or a law enforcement agency is doing the job of explaining and, doing stuff like National Night Out and stuff like that we do here in Strafford County, wonderfully between Rochester, Somersworth, Dover. I think that alleviates a lot of the issues that are happening in the country that really we don't see here as much. So like I said, communication between public safety agencies and its residents. I believe where there's communication, where communication is strong, we get reduced levels of pushback from the citizens because they understand why we're doing certain things and we're not just trying to take their rights away. So, that's the first thing that comes to me is communication, open dialogue. So.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant. And Miraqle, welcome. Nice to see you.
Hello, I'm Miraqle LaPierre. I'm currently a student at Dover High School, and I am in DREAM. So community safety, that's very big, especially since I'm a high schooler. So I feel like safety is like a really big thing for anyone. I just lost my train of thought. But safety means a lot. I think when it comes down to equality and just serving people. Also, like, I can't remember his name, the guy that went before me, the chief, I think, he said communication is good. So communication, with the police officers in the community is really good. I was lucky enough to be able to communicate with Chief Breault. I do apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. When we had our vigil in Dover, I was really, really nice to reach out and communicate with him to make sure that everything was going good. So yeah, just communication and safety is really, really huge in the community. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Miraqle. And, wonderful to have these introductions to understand your perspectives and really so much that is being done. And, I hope everybody in the panel will unmute. And we could take an opportunity to, if there are any ideas or if there are any responses that people on the panel have to what others have said. And, please just speak up if you want to follow up on something someone else said or respond, or if you want to ask each other questions about anything. So,
yeah, I'll start. I'll ask the two chiefs because they're living in a, unforeseen time where they're probably gonna, I don't know, be able to say, hey, we were chiefs during the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of, the change. And I feel like this is the forefront of where law enforcement now is going to cross over. And in terms of more community-based policing or whatnot, I know both agencies do an awesome job with reaching out to their communities. Based off of that, where I feel that here in Strafford County, specifically New Hampshire also, I feel like law enforcement's ahead of the curve as opposed to the rest of the country. Where do you guys see yourselves sitting in the seat you're sitting in now, building upon what we already have? Because, you know, some people in the community say, you know, we don't need anything else. This stuff that's happening in the South or whatnot isn't happening here. You know, where do you see yourself right now guiding your agencies to basically stay ahead of the curve? Because all of a sudden, all these other agencies are going to jump on board with CALEA, with standards, with bias-based policing. How do we stay ahead of that? And I'm interested to hear from you guys in person.
I'll take a shot. I agree with you. We are ahead of the curve. Speaking for Dover, we do the things you just talked about. We are CLEAR accredited. We have been since 1988, which really goes to my point of where I hope to be is continuing a strong organizational culture that understands that we really have to, through our own actions, have to prove that we are part of the community. We really have to do things. My personal feelings on why some of these police issues have occurred around the country is the organizational cultures of those departments. And I'm not singling out any specific department, but you know, from an outsider looking in, you can see that sometimes those cultures become an us versus them mentality, us, the police, versus them, the community. So we need to really guard against that. And I think the way we do that, the way that I'm working to do that here in Dover is not to do community policing in specialized community policing units. It's really to get community policing done throughout the organization. Every officer on every encounter, day or night, weekend, holiday, doesn't matter. Every time you have any of my officers, or even myself, meets with a member of the public, regardless of the reason, that's a community policing contact. That's the mentality we have to have. We do things here like I require our officers to go out and have, we call it our community contacts program. The officers have to go out and have contact with members of the community in a non-law enforcement or it can't be in any way related to their role as a police officer. So just go out and meet with members of the public. And we do that in a variety of ways. And I let the officers do whatever they're comfortable doing. Some officers go and eat lunch with students in some of the elementary schools, high-five them on the way in. Some of our officers who maybe not as great with little kids would rather go meet with some of our LD folks at some of our senior care facilities and have coffee with the residents there, or stop by a park, or stop by a shop downtown. We don't care what it is. Just go out and have contact with the community, because what that does is, in my opinion, is two things. One, that member of the community who we probably don't deal with, right? I'm sure Chief Kretschmar and Lieutenant Breault will say the same thing. We, as law enforcement, we deal with a very small percentage of our population, a lot. So this allows us to deal with members of the public that we may not have any other contact with. And it shows that member of the public, hopefully, that we're part of that community, right? We're there having a normal conversation, talking about our interest or whatever it might be. But it also shows our officers that not everybody in the community is suspicious or committing a crime or is somebody we're going to deal with in a law enforcement role. And I really think it helps guard against that us versus them mentality that unfortunately you do see develop in other organizations in other parts of the country. And I think that's to me, that's the biggest cancer that an organization, a police organization, can have, because then we're not working with you, we're working against you. And we need to really guard against that. So to me, that's what it means. I think here we've done a great job with community policing, and I know Somersworth does, and throughout New Hampshire and throughout New England, quite frankly. But I think we need to take it really to that next step and really get it ingrained in our organizational cultures that every officer, regardless of rank, regardless of the reason why you're contacting somebody, if we all go about with that mentality, that we really want to, it's like customer service. So we really want to leave that person, even if we take enforcement action, leave them feeling like, boy, that officer really cares about me, really cares about the job they're doing and being professional. I think we'll go a long way. I think we really need to, through our actions, make it so that treating people with dignity, respect, and compassion and enforcing the law are not mutually exclusive. We can do both. And I think here we do. But we can give somebody a ticket and treat them politely and with respect and dignity. We can arrest people and treat them with dignity and respect. There doesn't have to be, two different areas where we do that. It should happen all the time in every encounter.
Chief Kretschmar, did you want to add something to respond to Mark about community policing and certainly the community contact? And we're in the era not just of COVID, but Black Lives Matter. And, these are the questions that are being asked. And so, Chief Kretschmar, did you have something to respond to what Mark has brought up? Or?
Sure. It's pretty tough to follow up on what Chief Breault just said because he pretty much covered every base. But the biggest thing to me that he hit on that I think is really, really important starts with the culture within the police department. If the culture within the police department is such that they're adversarial with citizens and the public, we're on the wrong track. And I truly believe that starts with the hiring process and the vetting process of who we are hiring as police officers. I really believe that certain people fit certain communities and certain policing methods. I strive to keep our culture exactly what Bill had talked about, where we can go out and if we have an interaction, let's face it, if you're stopped on a traffic stop or you're a suspect in a crime, it's not always the most pleasant thing that's going to happen to you in your life. And I strive and I try to make sure that we strive that when that interaction is over, the person felt like they were treated with respect and as a human being. And I really think that treating people as humans is something that we really, really have to strive to do no matter what the situation is. And to me, that belongs or starts with the culture and the makeup of the police department itself.
Thank you so much, Chief. And, to kind of follow up on this as well, I think a lot of members of the public kind of see the results of social services and policing, whether it's the police log or noticing, just seeing the kind of increasing issues about mental health and perhaps the interactions with people, substance use disorders. And, as the report that Rogers Group put out details about inequities. And the culture in New Hampshire is part of the culture of the United States. So we are not free from that. And, just one example too, this isn't in Rogers' report, I don't believe, but, if you look at the statistics for incarceration in our state for minor drug offenses, you're about 6 times more likely to be incarcerated if you're a person of color in New Hampshire, and the national average is about 3.5 times more likely. So, not to ascribe reason to that, but I think it shows the public perceptions. And I really wondered if, John and Janet in particular, and Rogers and Miraqle, what is it that we need to do so these organizations work together so that there is diversion, that these kinds of encounters don't end up coming down as police actions on individuals that, might really better be treated in other ways. So John, Janet, Rogers, Miraqle, any kind of advice about that, about, how we can get at some of the issues that people are pointing to?
I certainly have thoughts. I know that'll come as a big surprise to Senator and to Chief Breault and Chief Kretschmar, but I think we do work well with the police departments currently, but one of the problems that we have when we look at substance use disorder, mental health, kind of those basic needs, is those areas not at any fault of the police departments, but by policy they're criminalized. So substance use disorder is a criminalized health issue, as is mental health. When you look at arrest records, the criminal trespassings and the possession charges, it's not often talked about. New Hampshire has some of the strictest drug laws in the country. Most of our surrounding states, simple possession of heroin, for instance, is a misdemeanor for under certain quantities. That's not the case in New Hampshire. And what often gets lost is that once an individual has that felony charge, that's a life sentence, or at least a good 10 years, where finding employment, finding housing is compromised. And so in one space, we're saying we can't arrest our way out of this, but in the other, we still have laws that don't represent that, and we still have enforcement actions that don't work. So we've done some really good work with Dover, with the law enforcement assisted diversion, which is a program where individuals who, for minor offenses that are that aren't non-violent, minor offenses such as possession, a criminal trespass, sometimes things of that nature, without getting booked or arrested, we can divert them into intensive case management, which we do, and we have individuals on call 24/7 in Dover and Farmington for that, and it's a great program. At the same time, there was, I just finished a report. There was some 580 people arrested in the last year in Dover, from from June through May, and about 90 of those charges were eligible, and we've diverted, a total of 15 people in Dover. So there's still a lot of opportunity there. And then the bigger picture as it relates to the issue around race and ethnicity is, like you said, Senator Waters, 5 to 6 times more likely if you're a black person in this state to be incarcerated than if you're a white person. And yet these are the charges that people are facing. And so we know it's disproportionate, and we're still keeping these laws on the books, that we're not working to, reduce the sentences in terms of like what those penalties are. So the police are enforcing what's on the books. And I think from a policy standpoint, we need to take a harder look at that. I mean, a perfect example of this is the Granite Shield program in New Hampshire. So that program was designed to arrest people who are quote unquote mid-level dealers. The reality is the majority of people who get arrested are for possession. And that program receives more funding than 17 recovery community organizations across the state of New Hampshire. Over $3 million goes to Granite Shield. Less than $3 million goes to recovery community centers. So when we say we can't arrest our way out of it, that got almost unanimous support in the legislature. And yet, so, those aren't reflective of a lot of the language that we're using when we say we're trying to, reduce the arrests and focus on services. And that money would be much better served in social service agencies, providing services for treatment, for recovery, for mental health. I mean, we're spread thin for what we have to do. So I'll share the time with others, and I'm sure there's other input.
And of course, the intersection of these issues, John, in that, and Roger's report, but also nationwide, that, the effects of systemic racism and poor housing and poor health care and so on disproportionately impacts communities of color. And so that they are going to need more mental health services. They are potentially going to have more encounters with the police, potentially have more substance use disorder. So these things really can't be parceled out. And that's why I thought this conversation would be valuable. It's just that, how is it that, for example, Janet, I mean, how is it you can work with the police departments? And then Rogers, with all the children, what advice do you have about how is it that police departments can move in the direction of, recognizing the intersection with these other issues? So Janet or Rogers, I didn't know if you had some further thoughts on it, or.
Sure. I mean, I certainly can speak to the mental health aspect, in that I believe that, we are in some ways ahead of the curve. I think we have done a lot of prevention and diversion, as John has outlined. We've had mental health court here in Strafford County for a long time. We were one of the first in New Hampshire actually to bring mental health court, and that really is a diversion program, a recognition that many folks that have very serious mental illnesses actually do commit crimes, but they really need rehabilitation. They need mental health services in order to get better, because sometimes their symptoms do lead to somewhat bizarre behavior. And so I really think that a lot of what we need to do is continue with this prevention and diversion, and find resources where we can come together collaboratively. I've worked a little bit with Bill here in Dover. We've had some really great conversations about, helping his officers when they recognize that they're going out and they're interacting with somebody that really is very symptomatic with a mental illness. And so they know that it's not criminal, but they want to help. And so I'll go back to what Bill said at the very beginning. And this is what I've experienced through both the Dover PD and the Somersworth PD is exactly what they said, that they treat everybody with dignity, respect, and compassion. I've really seen a ton of compassion, and I think that's where we need to continue to come together, because that's really what creates a safe environment. I heard everybody on this panel, and probably the folks that are listening in, that you're passionate about the community that you live in. And so we have to be tolerant of that. We have to be educated. And I think prevention really is, an early intervention is the best, because you're right, John, we cannot arrest our way out of these problems. And I don't want to put police officers in those positions. I want to educate them. I want to give them the tools and resources, because they do interact with our clients every day. And I want those interactions to be positive interactions. I don't want them to be negative interactions. And I think that, they have been very open to that. And I think we need to continue doing more of that. We've bantered around the idea of liaison position, a mental health liaison position to the police departments that can really assist and advise. And we would love to see that, across Strafford County, but at least in our bigger cities like Dover, like Somersworth and Rochester, to really help the police in having more positive community interactions with our folks that have mental illness. So.
Miraqle, if I could bring you in here on this. Miraqle, I think that many people in the thousands who were at the vigil for Black Lives Matter were really struck by the experiences that Dover High School students brought forward about, not just at the high school, but about their lives in our communities. And, and visibly some of the students were talking about issues that have been very stressful to them. And I wondered, how you feel about the availability of services, or that the environment in which you and your fellow students find yourself in our communities. And I just wondered, how you would respond to what folks have been talking about here.
Well, I do agree with everything everyone has said so far. They just say it a lot better than I can. One thing I can say is that I do appreciate everyone and how you guys have been wording everything, especially the chiefs, because that really means a lot, because I'm growing up and I'm slowly becoming an adult. So, who knows what type of things me or my peers could run into, in the future. Just knowing that, they'll want to treat everyone with compassion and want to be honest and make sure everybody's positive and just, being great leaders in the community. That really means a lot. One thing I can say, though, is it took a little while for Dream and us to find our spot in the community at first, because we weren't really welcomed, not by any of you guys, but more so like from the school. So it was a little bit hard. But once we got out there and was able to do the vigil, it was a lot of love. And I was really grateful that the community, sent love to us and that we were able to send it back with that. So I really appreciated that.
Well, Miraqle, I'm glad you felt the love, because it was an act of love for you all to stand up there and talk about your feelings and what you had been through, and what, and what you've encountered at the school in our streets. I mean, I think it took a lot of bravery, but also a lot of love. But I just got to say, that loving you back is not enough, right? I mean, we got to do some things. And this I wondered if I could bring you in, Rogers. And this is kind of getting into we had a lot of questions sent in, and I did want to kind of follow up on some of your work and kind of fold in some of the questions that I've gotten about law enforcement. And I'm sure the chiefs and Lieutenant Brave will want to respond. And, and people may not know everything that the sheriff's office does. It's the jails, yes, it's the courts, but also evictions and encounters with people in our streets who are having difficult times. And I fear we're going to see more of evictions in the future too. But Rogers, you're looking at police departments around the state. You're looking at police training, and we passed House Bill 1645, and it's been signed, and that of course chokeholds, but it also has a lot of other things about responsibility, but it points to just the kind of larger issues about how we're trying to diversify our police departments through hiring, but also implicit bias training, or what are we doing to de-escalation techniques, and these are things that the departments do work on. But what's your sense of where we're at and where we need to go on these kinds of issues of policing?
Well, Senator, one of the most important things to keep in mind is that in overall evaluation of community policing in the state of New Hampshire, the first thing that the citizens of New Hampshire need to understand is that the various police departments, including the state police, are probably head and shoulders above police departments all across the country. The level of dedication that I have encountered with police departments from Hanover to Rochester to Seabrook to Littleton is that they believe and wholeheartedly endorse the aspect of policing for the benefit of the people of the state. Along those lines, we all understand the need for continuous improvement in training, continuous improvement in understanding what accountability stands for. And we're going to make sure that those steps are taking place, including finding ways to make sure that the police departments are accredited, which also improves their overall capabilities. The most important thing to keep in mind here is that there's a dedication amongst police officers within the state to achieve a higher level of community service that, I think we can accomplish because we are a small state, that they do encompass those capabilities. But there are things that we need to improve on. For example, relative to mental health, yes, we probably need more conflict intervention teams. Excuse me. We need to make sure that it encompasses the entire state. We only really have them down in the southern part. How do we make sure that that's available to individuals in Coast, Carroll, and Grafton counties, and to get that type of service to them much more quickly than we can do so now, and make sure that those teams can interact with the police. The creation of a specialized 988 number for mental health issues needs to be put forward more than we have to date. These are things that we need to do to make sure that there's a level of education within the populace as to what's actually happening. If we tell the people in the state what the police are actually doing, I think they will feel better about how these services are provided. The reason why that hasn't happened yet is because they're just unaware. And we need to do a better job of making sure that they are part and parcel of what's going on. The other aspects, of course, is the things that are taking part with health issues, the overall disparities in terms of housing, education, employment. They're going to take much longer to deal with. But we're willing to address it. And we should also take the effort in trying to make sure that people understand what it is that need to be done.
So Rogers, thank you for your work, and you raise a lot of difficult issues, and I'm thinking too back to what John said about here we are on a panel, and where are the communities that are served, how is we sure that their voices are being heard, and New Hampshire's a much more diverse state than people realize. The growth of minority populations is really, really escalating in the state. And so it presents particular challenges, I think, to our departments. And Mark, excuse me, Lieutenant Brave,
Right.
I did want to ask, if you might talk a little bit about, what the challenges are for departments in this area to hire officers of color and women officers too. And then I'm wondering too what you're seeing in terms of, I think because you're the most recent of the law enforcement here to go through training, and you spent your many years in Rochester, but still you're kind of newer than some of the others. And what do you think about this the state of implicit bias training? Just these kinds of areas that are, I think, kind of difficult for all people in New Hampshire to kind of understand where we're at and how we need to make those kinds of changes.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying, Roger hit on a great point. Mr. Johnson hit on a great point. He said, basically, if people knew what police departments are doing to try and, make a difference, even if we don't know how to do it, we're trying. So I know Janet said, she witnessed, she worked with Dover PD, Somersworth PD. So you see that firsthand what officers, the chiefs are doing to try and make a change in their communities. And that goes back to my first part of communication. We need to figure a way to systematically incorporate the social services into current law enforcement day-to-day operations. And I think that's the challenge that we're gonna have going through this whole thing, because, again, going back to mental health, walking into a situation where, like Chief Breault says, my officers know that this is not, he's not acting out because he's under influence or anything, or she. It's a mental health situation, but the officer isn't educated enough to know what that situation is. So how do we incorporate professionals from your group, Janet, or your group, John, in responding to that in the moment, though, not here's a card or let me call you and you'll talk to them. It's like, how do we respond in the moment? Senator Waters, in regards to the other question, again, I was born in Miami, Florida. That community looked a lot different than where I am now. So most of the agencies were, of minority, Caucasian Americans were the minorities in my community. So in regards to your question, I think CALEA, going through the CALEA portion, there's a lot of...
Tell us what CALEA is.
Okay, so it's Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. It's basically the ruling body on, they have tons of resources. It's the ruling body in the country on the best practices, the best ways to do things that they've seen have been successful in other parts of the country, even the world. They're nationwide, and they bring a bunch of these ideas to a table, and they talk up and they teach agencies on how to incorporate them in their little area of the country or the world. But I see that in regards to recruiting minorities, CALEA has allowed us and guided us to figure a way to, okay, this is the demographic you're dealing with. Let's try and touch some of the neighboring community, the neighboring states, Massachusetts. We've hired people from Connecticut. I work with a guy in Rochester from I believe he was from New York or something. It's definitely challenging because we don't have that group of people here readily available to be recruited. So that's why we have recruiting departments where we send them out to recruit, whether it's in Boston, Mass, or Chief Breault and Chief Kretschmar, you guys could talk more on this, because with the sheriff's office, the running joke is everyone comes to the sheriff's office after retirement, or or to end their career, or just to do a couple transports. I've been in law enforcement only 11 years. But I know we've been trying to change that culture and try to be more, I don't know, centralized. You know, that's the plan for the sheriff's office. But again, it's a challenging question, Senator, because again, I know for a fact that we here in Strafford County, the agencies I know of, do try, you know, they put stuff in, you know, Indeed.com. They try to send officers to, you know, Massachusetts colleges and say, hey, why don't you move to New Hampshire? I'll tell you a story here. I never thought I was going to be living in New Hampshire. I mean, I visited my friend when I was in college at UNH, and I thought it was the woods. Like, I thought it was like there's no way I'm living in the mountains. Now I'm living less than 15 minutes from the campus, you know. It's a great place to live, but we need to do a better job of advertising that, raising a family. So I mean, that's just my input on it. But that CALEA is definitely a first step in helping an agency, a small agency. You know, we're not the LAPD or New York Police Department, but a small agency with a certain demographics, figure out how to bring a different vibe to that environment in that area. So
thank you, Lieutenant. And you know, I know Dover you know, prides itself on having gone through the process of being, you know, certified, and it's a good process. And but in particular, I wanted to, you know, Chief Breault or Chief Kretschmar, you know, what you're have been trying to do, or what you think you might be able to do in the future for recruitment in a diversity area, and just how is it, you know, how are your officers feeling about where things are at right now? And you know, the defensiveness thing is an issue because it's been kind of tough lately, and the issues of race and Black Lives Matter, which are really, you know, meant to be a way of opening a conversation about, you know, good things that we can move forward. But I just wonder, Chiefs, you know, how you see this moment, and you know, what do you think? Where do you think the departments, you know, can make some progress?
So it doesn't matter to me, gender, race, or anything when I'm looking at a candidate. And I know that people hear that all the time. I have 26 sworn positions, well, 26 officers out of 27 right now. I have one opening, but 20% of my officers are either female or African American, which for a city our size, I pride myself on that. And it's because they're the right candidates and they have the right outlook, and they fit in Somersworth. They fit with this police department. They understand what we're trying to do. And that's the most important thing to me. So that portion of it, if we're looking at somebody from Lieutenant Brave's office right now.
Taking him. Taking him.
But it just comes down to me to treating, I said it before, it's treating people like humans. And if you fit the culture and what we want to do here, that's the most important thing to me.
Thank you. And Chief Breault, what do you have any further?
I completely agree with Chief Kretschmar, and I would add that it's a bit, we are doing the things that Lieutenant Brave talked about. We have over the last probably 4 or 5 years really expanded our recruiting efforts to much further outside of the state of New Hampshire. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, we certainly won't lower our high standards, right? You have to meet a certain level to be offered the job here, and that we won't lower. In finding the best candidate, if we hire, you know, we interview, we're not fortunate to get this number, but say we interviewed 100, we're going to take the best candidate, regardless of their sex, their race, or any other issues. So, you know, again, we have to stay true to that. We can't lower the standards simply to recruit any class of person. But we do, I agree with Lieutenant Brand, we do need to really think outside the box and figure out ways to make, you know, for us, make Dover more inviting. And it's kind of difficult. We've had success in recruiting minority officers, but in this state, minority officers are so highly sought after, they can go wherever they want to go. So we have lost minority officers to Manchester, the state police, to other agencies that either will allow them to follow specific interests that they have, or can pay, quite frankly, pay better. So recruiting is a big part of it, but then figuring out ways to retain minority officers is another big part of it, all while not lowering our standards to do so. So it is a complicated issue, and like Lieutenant Brave said, as far as I know, nobody's solved it yet. But we really need to start thinking outside the box and how can we become more attractive for minorities. And really, I think that starts with things like showing, people of color and minorities that, we have groups like DREAM in our community because we value that. And that will help us as we move forward.
Well, thank you. And, it is such a challenge. I know from my own experience at the University of Hampshire that when you work on diversity, it's about building a more diverse pool, and that these candidates are often extremely highly qualified, and that then it becomes a question of being sure that the pool is developed so that there is an opportunity to hire and to retain folks and so on. But it's good to hear what the departments are looking at. I did want to have an opportunity to bring in Mayor Hilliard and Mayor Carrier and Isaac. I hope that will be possible. Perhaps we could start with Mayor Hilliard, if you can bring him on screen or unmute him, if he's with us.
He should be joining the panel shortly. Mayor Hilliard.
And good evening. Good to see everyone. I'll start by saying, with all due respect to the great lieutenant there, Lieutenant Brave, nothing makes me happier than to hear from Chief Kretschmar that Somersworth is finally starting to steal people from other cities. Because unfortunately, we have a history of having all of our employees stolen, whether it be police, fire, public works, teachers. It seems that history is now changing, just like the history of the great hilltop city, that the bleeding is stopping, and now we're starting to replenish with taking some from some others. So I look forward to hearing where that new officer is going to come from, Lieutenant. Maybe the sheriff. So, this has just been a great conversation this evening, and part of the conversation is not losing sight. I mean, everyone, I think most of the people on the panel know that I'm an educator by trade. I have the best two jobs in the world, as I'm a principal of a middle school and mayor of a great city. And prior to becoming a principal, I was a social studies teacher. And never losing sight of the history of where we came from and the direction that we are going in is so important. 244 years ago, we started that American experiment, and we're still moving forward with that. And it's an experiment. It's an experiment in democracy. We knew when we set those words on parchment on July 4th, 1776, that it was going to take a long time to come to fruition of ensuring that, and I like to say that all people, because even the word men excludes one of our members of the panel, that all people would be created equal, and that the universal inalienable rights to everyone would be protected. And on that day, the reality is that if we look at the panel, that 3 people on this panel would be in bondage. 1 person on this panel would be a second-class citizen. We go even further then down to our history. It wasn't till in 1850 that in New Hampshire that the voters during the election of 1850 approved amending the Constitution to allow other than Protestants to serve in state office. Up until that point, it was only Protestants that could serve in state office. 4 years later in New York City, in the New York Times in 1854, the first publication of The Irish Need Not Apply started circulating all throughout the United States. And we have continued to correct our actions painfully, and sometimes paying a very big price for our moves of inequality, and for us not looking in the face and holding true of what we wanted. As we all know, 650,000 identified Americans lost their life from 1861 to 1865 when this country was split in 2. And those are the bodies that were counted. From then, the reality is, if I go back 20 years ago, just as a gay male, I would not be able to legally have the position that I have as a principal, because under state law, I could be dismissed. I could literally be fired by the school board for just being gay. Does that make me angry? No, that gives me hope in the direction that we continue to go. It gives me hope that with each generation, we become more and more active, and that Americans are known, as I like to often have conversations with a lot of my best friends who live in Canada, and we will certainly have colorful conversations at time between our two cultures. But, you know, Americans don't shy away from hanging our dirty laundry out on the line and examining that dirty laundry and working hard at correcting it. And certainly here in Somersworth, in a 10 square mile community that's known as New Hampshire's welcoming community, it is important that we honor each other, that we celebrate each other. I hate the word tolerance. You know, the word tolerance means that we tolerate each other. We have to do better than tolerate each other. It is treating each other with respect. It is treating each other with civility. And it is really, as quirky as it might sound, realizing that at the end of the day, we are all brothers and sisters. And I am so proud of our chief and really the progressive measures that he's been able to bring to this 10 square mile community. Sure, we certainly don't have our problem. I mean, we have our problems, but we're moving forward and correcting those. And, you know, one small example of just how committed we are to this community, you know, the smallest community in New Hampshire, the smallest city in New Hampshire. My favorite little corner of Somersworth is this small little plot of land right next to City Hall, which holds a 10 Commandments monument that was donated in 1850 that the city re-put up and had issued a city council vote to restore after it was vandalized and struck down with the plan. And the plan was that we would put 2 flagpoles by those 10 Commandments monuments. We'd rename it as Citizens Place, and we would fly the city flags, but that through the mayor's office, any organization or any group within our community could fly their flag as long as their organization did not represent intolerance and hate. And since that small little plot of land has been renamed Citizens Place, every ethnicity that you could possibly think of's flag has flown. We've had an atheist flag fly over the 10 Commandments monument. I'm sponsoring the Black Lives flag right now until the month of November. Every major organization and minor organization in the city of Somersworth has been represented. And really that holds to the values of this community, is that this community is known for neighbors helping neighbor, and that we know that we're all in this together and moving in the same direction. And that direction is to—
Thank you so much, Mayor.
When we
Thank
hold
you. And, you know, as some people may not know on the Zoom that with over 2,000 Indonesian folks in Somersworth, it certainly is proving itself as a welcoming community. And I hope we'd have a comment too from Mayor Carrier if he was able to get on. Isaac, can you bring on Mayor Carrier? You might be muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Mayor. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, there you are.
Well, thank you. I got a little confused on the format initially, but here I am. And Dana, you keep your hands off our employees. They're not leaving us. So anyway, thank you. This has been quite a discussion that I've listened to. There's a lot of parts to this. I'm not sure. I'm not going to get into the history. I probably didn't do that well in high school with history. I'm not sure. I loved it, but Dana really complimented, you know, going back. He had some great points. As far as the city of Dover, I've been here all my life. I'm 68 years old, and I've seen a lot of change, a ton of change. I've seen through the Vietnam War. I've seen everybody angry. I've seen, you know, way back when we had communities, different neighborhoods that, you know, you had to watch where you drive up the street because kids were playing on the side street in the road, in a vacant plot of land, riding their bikes. That's a loving community. We still have a loving community. The world did change. And because of the change, I think with all of what everyone is doing has a portion of that to keep moving forward. Education, the substance abuse is unbelievable. I went to Plymouth State College, as it was called back then. And there were many, many guys on heroin, smoking marijuana all the time. And, you know, I saw it. I never did any of that, but I saw a lot of it. And of course, when I went to school, it was the height of the Vietnam War. And it wasn't good times. It was, most people were anti-government. One thing, though, that is really interesting in my world, and the world I've been born and raised in Dover, is that I never considered really any of the other ethnic groups, Black Lives Matter, any of that, as anything. I mean, we all got along. We played sports, we did things. It just, nothing ever, you know, was any problem that way. And, you know, it's gotten delicate, and I get it. I understand it. But I'm trying to understand it more so I can be a better person and understand it and reach out. I lean on a lot of the people in the community for discussion, and that's pretty much what we're doing right now. We're forming an ad hoc committee for racial equity in the city. There'll be a combination of people. They're filling out applications, go through the appointments committee, make a recommendation to city council, then we'll form the committee. And at that point, it'll pretty much cross-pollinate with the already existing committee that the school has. And I know Mark Brave's on that committee also. And it's good. It's a good thing. I just hate to see things going, you know, backwards. And I call it backwards as far as animosity, racial inequities. I understand with the employment, a lot of times it's not a fair shake with some nationalities. But I think, you know, the administration in Dover is trying to do a very, very big reach out to all members of the community. I think with the discussion, excuse me, that all of you have had today is enlightening. I think that there's a lot of parts to this that we can all help out and reach out. But I think that's the first step. I think you can't be afraid. You really can't. You know, if you see something that's kind of funny, not right, you know, talk about it. You know, reach out. Maybe you can help that person. You know, don't be afraid. And that's what happens. You can't just run to your house, shut the door, and say, well, I'm not going to look at this again. You know, I got a video the other day from a citizen, and they did a reach out, and there was somebody, and a police chief saw it, that was walking down the sidewalk late at night, sat on front steps, tied his arm in a band, and took a needle out and shot up right in public. And, you know, those are the things that, you know, that's where we have to have help. That's where John Burns comes in and does a fantastic job, and to reach out and grab these people and say, look, we're here to help you. There's a lot of organizations, community action partners, all of those organizations that do a reach out for the homeless and all that. But, you know, I really appreciate you asking me to, you know, chime in, say a few words.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor Carrier and Mayor Hilliard. And I think that everyone who's been a participant today has understood that this is the kind of conversation that needs to happen in all of our communities. And I think you see a kind of an example of here how people are willing to listen and talk and to work together, I hope, as well. As we wrap up, I feel that I want to emphasize particularly a kind of a call to action. It's always good to end a meeting with that and some commitments. And I will say personally that for me, one of the most important things to do is to develop relationships among ourselves and with people in the community, so that we understand each other and we know how we can work together. And I would say in particular, I really hope all the panelists will commit to reach out to Miraqle LaPierre and to Project Dream at the high school. You know, the vigil was a good thing, but I think we need to learn what our students are facing every day. We need to understand, since they are the future, what kind of world they expect of us and what we may have failed to do previously. And I hope that the folks in the panel will commit to getting back together, perhaps later on in September, to report on the efforts that you've made to connect with each other more than, I know some are already pretty well connected, but what efforts have been made on these matters. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from Rogers Johnson and the work that he's doing. We're going to be hearing a lot more what the needs are of the recovery community and in mental health and in education. And then I hope that when we get a little bit farther along and perhaps we get back together in November or December, and this is when we really are going to have to talk about what needs to be done in terms of budgets at the local and state levels, and certainly what needs to be done with some laws, ordinances at the local level. But you know, we heard from John Burns and we've heard from others that we really need to look hard at what we are doing at the state level in terms of our statutes and helping our communities move forward and making some really necessary reforms and continue with that process. And to the participants, I think the call to action to participants is to please reach out. You know, I tried to go through as many or almost a lot of the questions, but they're great. We need to hear more. Please be in touch with me or with Isaac Epstein or with the people on the panelists, and they need to hear from people. And I think in particular, I wanted to close with the words of John Lewis. He said, "Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble." Now, I hope we've made some good trouble today. I hope we have, and I hope we will in the future to make our communities what they aspire to be. So I want to thank you again. Thank you again to Isaac Epstein. Thank to all the panelists and all the participants as well. And have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.